Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now. All right, so Alex Pereira, he is in the news. He is one of the biggest, if not the biggest star
Hmm.
in uh in the UFC right now, right?
Right.
And it's incredible what he has done. There's nothing there's not many people that you can compare him to, right? Like in the short amount of time that he's accomplished what he's accomplished, right? So there's a tweet by Elon, what's his name? Elon
It's not Musk.
Ilonov.
Oh yeah.
His
Oh.
there was a I think he it's like a it's like a fan account. So it's like
Yeah.
Elon Rachmanov or something
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Elon Rachmanov. Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
see.
like he put a picture with Pereira and Khabib, and he said Alex Pereira has the same amount of title defenses this year as Khabib did overall, which is kind of nuts,
That is pretty
right?
crazy, huh?
And when you think of it like that, and you call Khabib the greatest of all time, doesn't
Right.
make sense.
Yeah, because it is a compelling argument, right? Because how are you gonna say that someone's the greatest if the guy basically does a probably your most impressive feat, but he does it within a year, right? It's like if depends on how much you factor time um, into how long it took to achieve something, and for sure it makes sense, right? Where it's like this is the he's what had the least amount of fights to get to as far as he had, so there's definitely something to say about that.
For sure. And he broke the record that Ronda Rousey had with the shortest amount of time with three successful title defenses as well. Ronda
Right.
Rousey had like 100 something like 875 days or 190 days, and then
Oh,
Pereira beat it by
man.
like a month or something like that, which is an incredible feat because when Ronda was doing it, everybody's like, "Oh my god, this is incredible. Like what's she doing?" And she was just knocking off, title defenses like it was nothing. And Pereira, it seems like he's the best he's ever been at the best weight,
Mm,
and just and then hearing about like the stuff that he had to go through ahead of the fight, like he was sick, he had the injuries, I mean the visa issues, like they were ready to cancel the main event and make Pennington uh Pena the main event. The
oh
UFC
wow.
was watching Pereira very closely as well.
Right.
It just shows you that that's why the UFC loves Pereira, not just because of the performances and the knockouts and all of that stuff. It's
Yeah.
because Pereira is willing to do anything
Yeah,
to
he's got that
become
attitude of like no excuse, it's like
exactly to become the best, to take on the most extreme challenges. Habib never did that. Habib was always
mm,
on full training camps. Islam full training camps. Like
right.
they've never taken short notice fights. Have you ever seen a guy like
Not that I can.
That's why Hamza was so special, or
Right.
is so
Yeah.
special.
Right. Because he fought on such short notice and then looked great doing it, which is
Exactly, and he did it like in a span of a certain amount of days that
yeah,
like nobody really from that region was able to do. And
that's true.
and everybody, when you come from that region, you're going to be compared to Habib, and the only way to separate yourself is to do something that he hasn't done, or probably would have never done. And that's what Hamza did. That's why Dana loved him, and that's why he became such a big star, and he is one of the biggest stars in the world
Mm,
right now. That's why he's still, even though he's not champion, I guarantee his popularity is much higher than Islam Makhachev, just
yeah,
because of what he did.
for
Pereira
sure.
is the same, cut from the same cloth, and I would put Pereira above Habib
Mm,
in like that conversation of greatest all time. Would I put him above John Jones? No, I
uh,
would not put Alex Pereira above John Jones, but I would put Alex Pereira above Habib. But then I would put a lot of fighters above Habib. I'll
right.
put GSP above Habib. Like just because he didn't lose doesn't mean that he did more than GSP.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Just
Right.
because you didn't lose doesn't mean that you did more than someone else in the sport.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
factoring winning percentage that heavily and ignoring the other stuff. It's like it's a convenient way to say someone's the best because they've never lost, right? But yeah, there's like if we're counting all the other stuff that goes into it, it's like how long did it take you to get there versus like what's how tough's your competition, what were the circumstances that, right? It's like if you have to overcome some ridiculous circumstances to make it to the top or stay up top, then that, then that obviously factors into like how um, how impressive the journey was to begin with if you don't have that many obstacles, right? So like that's kind of a, yeah, that's definitely worth considering. Like you got to give it
Yeah.
some
Another
context.
stat that is interesting about Pereira and Habib is that Pereira has a certain amount of fights, right? And I believe he has 7 finishes in the UFC.
Ooh,
That's the same amount of finishes Habib had in the UFC.
Jesus.
And Habib fought way more fights.
Right.
You know what I mean? Think of that.
Yeah.
7 finishes in, I believe, in 7 or 8 fights, maybe 10 fights. And
Uh-huh.
then Habib had 7 finishes in like 20 fights. I think that's what it was.
Right.
Some number around there, right? It- Think of that. Think of
Yeah.
that. Those numbers.
Yeah,
If
that's
we're talking
insane.
about numbers, right? You talking
Yeah.
about 40-0? Is did he finish 30-0 or 40-0? 30-0, right?
Khabib was like 29 or 30-0, I think.
Yeah, 30-0, right? Okay, if you look at numbers, okay, 30-0, okay, then you look at the finishes. You can't ignore those numbers either. If you're gonna focus on that number, you got to focus on this number as well.
Yeah. Right.
And to me, like if you're going against the best dudes in the world and just knocking them off, like finishing them after left and right, that shows you that you are, in the conversation of like being one of the greatest of all time, right? Like, and winning 2 titles.
Hmm.
Like Habib only had 1 title and he only defended it for a few times and then
Right.
left. Right? Like if you compare those things, like, there's a lot of arguments against Habib, but the
Hmm.
fans that support Habib, they're not hearing it
Right.
because it's like this. That's all they care about. He never lost. He
Yeah.
never lost a round.
Mm.
He never bled. Stuff like that. That's what they want
Yeah.
to argue.
Right.
But
Right.
if you argue numbers, statistics, and that's what they like to argue as well. Oh, statistics. If he was 30-0, he never lost, and if he continued fighting, he would have never lost. No, come on. The
Right.
competition only gets tougher and tougher.
Absolutely.
Habib only gets older and older,
Yeah.
and the weight cuts get tougher and tougher.
They do. Yeah, the body
And
doesn't like that for long term.
exactly, and eventually, one time you step in there,
Hmm.
not everything's gonna go right.
That's for sure.
But
Yeah.
the thing about that's impressive about Pereira is he don't give a fuck about that, and he just goes in and he's like, "Hey, you want me to turn around and fight at this against this guy? Chama." You know what I mean? That's the
Yeah.
one word, right?
Right. Like part of, like I kind of argue that, obviously they're both champions, right? But one of the things that over time people have come to really respect about champions is like there's probably some saying that I think Chael Sonnen or like even Ronda Rousey might have said at some point, but I think Ronda Rousey was talking about her like Olympic judo days, right? But she was like, it's like you're not training just to be the best in the world, right? Like you're training to be the best in the world on your worst day because circumstances will never be perfect, right? You can try to get those circumstances as close to perfect as possible, but something always gets in the way. This isn't like some fantasy scenario where you basically like in bubble wrap up until your fight, right? That's a load of shit. It's
Mm.
just not going to happen that way. And so part of being that champion is how well do you handle those circumstances? Like if you factor in those circumstances, then it's like, all right, well, I know I'm operating at 85, 90% right now, and I can turn up as much as I can during the fight, but I've got to have that confidence up here that I don't need to be 100% to win. Like, and that's what Alex Pereira like has, which is, you know, it's an impressive thing to be like, all right, it's not 100% perfect, but let's do this anyway. Like fans enjoy that, fans appreciate
Mm.
that, and obviously the UFC appreciates that too because he's not pulling out of fights nearly as often if he's got that kind of mindset.
And this arguing about who's the greatest of all time. There is no greatest of all time.
Right.
There's no one person. There's no one fighter that is the
Hmm.
greatest of all time. It's like
Yeah.
if you look at basketball, everybody wants to point to Michael Jordan as, and I come from that era of Michael Jordan, 1990s, right? Like
Hmm.
I lived in that era. I watched basketball like closely during
Yeah.
that era. The Bulls was my team, right? Like I
Hmm.
love the Bulls, right? And then you got LeBron and you got all these guys coming on, Kobe, all these guys coming along to argue against that, which means that Michael Jordan is not the greatest of all time in basketball.
Hmm.
And just like in fighting too, like there is no greatest of all time. We could argue all day about it, but you know what I mean? I don't even think Khabib is in the first tier
Mm,
greatest fighters of all time. I don't even think he's in the first tier. There's so
right.
many fighters above him.
Hmm.
John Jones, GSP, even Anderson Silva. You know what I mean? Like who else was there? Like Pereira,
Yeah.
like Volkanovski, like Adesanya, Max Holloway. Like these guys, right? They're fearless. Like they went and fought the best dudes. They went short notice and took risks. You know what I mean? To me, that is the meaning of being the greatest of all time. Believing in yourself so much to the point where like you're gonna take on all these like exceptional challenges. And I don't think Habib did that. You know what I mean? Yeah, he fought Connor, which actually Connor surprised me in that fight. He actually did kind of well against Habib.
Yeah. Yeah. Some
You
of
know what I
that
mean?
takedown defense was
Yeah,
surprisingly on point. Yeah.
especially in the open. And that's
Yeah.
what they said, like, against those type of wrestlers, you have to be in the open. Because if
Right.
you're on the fence, it's not gonna you're no dice, man. It's not gonna help you. But like that's not what we're here to talk about. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
saying that there is no greatest of all time. But if you're arguing about like who's higher in the rankings of like being the better fighter and
Hmm.
like accomplishing more and stuff like, I think Alex Pereira is above Habib. And then you got to put like Adesanya next to Pereira because Adesanya beat Pereira, knocked
Hmm.
him out, like lured him in, knocked him out, and then you got to look at his track record of Adesanya's track record as well. And then if
Yeah.
you put Max Holloway as like one of the best, right? If you put him next to Aldo, then you got to put Volkanovski there next to all these guys, right? Because Volkanovski had a credible run, beat both those guys, beat Max 3 times. How do you beat a guy 3 times? And not be ranked above him,
Yeah.
right?
That's true.
It's not a popularity contest. Let's keep it real. It's not a
Yeah. That's
popularity contest.
objective.
Yes.
Like, look, this dude beat this dude enough times to be like, he's better. Right.
Yes,
That's, yeah.
exactly. And in fighting, that's what's weird. It's like there's one fighter out there that's probably gonna beat you every single time, and you
Uh
just
huh.
can't do nothing about it because it's just what it is, right?
That's true. A
you
hundred
know.
percent. 100%.
And then Habib would have probably ran into somebody that could just beat him. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? On a bad day, you know what I mean? Everything there's so many variables and factors in fights, right? To
Definitely.
where it's like if he just went in on a bad weight cut and then the dude came in 100% belief. And that's what happened to Amanda Nunez against
Mm,
Juliana Pena,
that's
right?
right.
Pena came in 100% belief, everything that she's gonna win. Amanda kind of like it seemed like she had a bad weight cut. The probably had a bad camp, and then came into the fight not
Hmm.
believing in herself, and then she
Right.
got finished. These things happen in fighting.
Absolutely.